Chairman, you're up.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our Development Review Commission for February 13, 2018. Tonight we'll be hearing a few cases, and if you wish to speak on one of them, we have some white cards in the back of the room. If you'd be kind enough to fill one of those out and give it to our city staff members, we'll accommodate you at the appropriate time. So our opening statement. The Development Review Commission is created to hold public meetings and hearings to provide analysis and recommendations to the City Council regarding general land use policies and applications where the Commission has the power to recommend and to render final decisions on specified applications where the Commission has final decision-making power, including but not limited to all aspects of a proposed and future development. The Development Review Commission recognizes that the creation of a desirable environment throughout the city for residents, business, and industry is a prime requisite for the interdependence of land values, aesthetics, and good site planning by promoting harmonious, safe, attractive, and compatible development that is therefore considered to be in the best interest of public health, safety, and general welfare. It's a mouthful. First on our agenda tonight, we are going to consider our meeting minutes from previous sessions. We have already fact-checked them. We have meeting minutes for September 25 and January 23rd. Do I hear a motion regarding said minutes? Commissioner Amorosi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to make a motion to approve the study session from September 25th, 2017, the study session from January 23rd, and the regular meeting minutes also from January 23rd.
Okay, motion by Commissioner Amorosi. Do I hear a second? Second by Commissioner Johnson. All those in favor, please show by raise of hand. And that's the last two. Interesting. We have 3 in the affirmative, and missing. Sorry, I saw the 2 of you, and oh yes. Oh, I'm sorry, I just didn't see your hand. I need new glasses. Okay. So, do I have it right now? We have 4 in the approval. Any opposed? Okay, we have 3 in abstention because you were not in attendance. Okay, so that passes 4-0. That is. Boy, we squeaked by on that one. Okay. Let's see if the rest of the night goes any better. Okay. Exciting start, ladies and gentlemen. So we have 2 items on our consent agenda. We propose to approve these without further discussion if no one from the public wishes to have them heard or to speak on them. So if you do want to speak on them, we're going to give you a chance to wave your hands and say, let's hear it. Those 2 items are agenda item number 5, Supima Agave, and item number 7, tell me its name again, the Fix Coffee. Is there anyone from our public that would like to hear those cases and speak on them? Seeing none, we will go ahead and have a motion on our consent agenda. Do I hear such a motion? Commissioner Johnson.
I move for the approval of the consent agenda.
Okay, moved by Commissioner Johnson. Do I hear a second? Commissioner Thornton seconds. All those in favor by raise of hands, please. And opposed is none. So that's 7-0. Our consent agenda passes. Thank you. So let's move on to agenda item number 4. We have Sound Lighting FX. Mr. Kingsby.
Good evening, Commission. Obina Kingsby, Planner 2, City of Tempe. Sound FX Lighting is a new development consisting of 2 warehouse buildings with the caretaker's residence. The applicant is requesting a development plan review consisting of a site plan, building elevations, and landscape plan. The proposed buildings will be significantly set back from the street, as you can see from the site plan up on the screen. The lot coverage is approximately 24%. One of the buildings will be at 35%, which is building A, which is in the corner there. That will be 35 feet in height, and the other will be 26 feet. There will be a single gated ingress-egress driveway, as you can see from the front, off of Miller Road, and it'd be for both vehicles and pedestrian access on the side there. And the project will be well landscaped along the perimeters and the frontages. Staff is recommending approval of this project subject to conditions. The project will meet the development standards under the Zoning and Development Code, and also the project meets the approval criteria for a development plan review. I can answer any questions you have about this at the moment.
Okay, questions for staff? We've already heard a couple. Do you want to ask any more? Not right now? Okay, thank you, Mr. Kingsby. So now let's have our applicant.
The video didn't have any sound on it. Okay, okay, you do want it up?
That's brief.
And quickly, just so we're sure, could you tell us your name, please?
Good evening. I am Robert Briggs. I'm an architect with Tebow LLC. I'm the architect for the project and the applicant. I have a brief PowerPoint presentation with my amateur PowerPoint skills that'll help introduce the project to you. For Sound and Lighting FX. Basically, they're a company that provides sound, lighting, and audio-visual for projects, events outside of their facility. They can do backyard events up to 50,000 people. They've been doing this for many years, and you might recognize some of the photos coming up as events that they have done locally in Tempe, Fort Peaks, or Festival of the Arts. But they are wide-ranging and work in multiple states. They're happy to select this property because it meets some certain needs for them. It is in GID, which allows for industrial building, but also for caretaker's residence. Our owners of Sound and Lighting FX want to live on this property as well. So this property is not only their business, but it's their home. So they like the property for its central location, its proximity for their business, but also the neighborhood feel for their own residents. The building itself, pretty modern in nature, metal, stucco, but really the challenge here was placing a residence on top of a warehouse. How do we achieve that and break up the scale and make it inviting and have everything that a residence needs, but meet the functionality of an industrial building? So we've tried to do that in a number of architectural features that I'm sure we'll talk about. So here we are, Sound and Lighting FX. They're looking forward to their new home in Tempe, and I'm ready to answer any questions you may have.
I'm going to hold off on my questions and defer to my fellow commission members. Questions for our applicant? Commissioner Amorosi.
Yes. My question is, and thank you, Mr. Chair. You talk about neighborhood feel, and yet you won't move the apartment up to the street level where you would get eyes on the street. I look at all the surrounding properties, and they're all closer to the street than yours. And yet, if they walk by it's probably at least 60 feet frontage over there. All they're going to see is an 8-foot-high fence, which is more like a fortress. And I don't see how that helps blending in with the neighborhood at all. I see you as, we don't want to be part of the neighborhood, if anything. So, and all you have behind there is a parking lot. It isn't like it's something integral to what you need for your business. And and I don't mean any ill will to Sound Lighting Effects. They do nice work, but if they do go out of business, the city of Tempe is stuck with this apartment all the way in the back with a giant parking lot in the front on a relatively small street that has a lot of residential. Why?
Well, thank you for your comments. The siting was very intentional. Having the industrial need there and the GID fits the needs for their business. Their business is one where they pack up trucks full of their event coordinated stuff and take it off site. No events on site. Owners wanted to make sure that I explained that. No events on site. So the GID fit that perfectly. This property is uniquely shaped, L-shaped, with the big part of the property towards the east end with a relatively narrow street frontage or street exposure. The function of the main building, Building A, as Obadiah mentioned, Building A is really the nuts and bolts of their operations. And the scale of that building is such that we couldn't obtain that building near the west street frontage and still allow access to the property. The driveway width requirements, the access in and out, and then the function of that building pushes that building back to the back side of the property, or the east end of the property. So that's from the industrial side of it. The unique part of this building, in my eyes, is the residential portion, that the caretaker's residence can be on site. And that's when we started looking at exposures, we started looking at views. The property itself is industrial in nature, with residential directly across the street and residential directly to the north with the condos. We felt we were being sensitive to those existing residential uses by pulling the building further away from the residents, basically putting a 6,400 square foot warehouse right on the front of a street that has single family on the opposite side we didn't feel was very attractive at all. But addressing the street, we felt we can increase our landscaping, we can provide at least 2 materials on our wall separating it, which match the building. We're proposing stucco with the corrugated metal, as well as some steel mesh screens for plants to grow into. So while we have 60 feet of frontage, we felt like that was a relatively narrow frontage that we didn't want to fill with industrial building.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Other questions? Commissioner Sumner.
Just a very quick one. I know there's not going to be events on site, but do you do any testing, any setup, any certifications, anything like that?
They do testing and certifications and whatnot of electronics. After they come back, they do test them always inside the building. There's a lab portion or a testing facility at the back side of that Building A that they go in and they have all their equipment hooked up to it. So no testing either on the outside of the building.
Commissioner Brown.
The 8-foot street side screen wall is a little tall. Is that to screen tall trucks or for security?
Really, through our 4 site plan reviews, we were back and forth with staff, and at one of those reviews, it was recommended that we raise the height of our site wall to 8 feet, and I think that was partially in reaction to our high bay doors facing Miller. We have 3 doors on that Building A that face that parking lot, and even though they are 120 feet back, pretty far back screen by distance, I think it was an accommodation to staff to make an 8-foot high site wall on the Miller side.
I see. Thank you.
Okay, I have a question. I'm going to jump in. And this is a little bit more curiosity. I can't think when else I've seen residential on top of a warehouse. I'm just thinking about the special considerations that you'll have to make that function properly. It's not necessarily going to affect how this case goes in any way, but if you would indulge me, can you tell me about how do you plan on insulating that if you're going to have a potentially warm warehouse underneath your residence? How do you address the mechanical? How do you address the insulation on having that side also open?
Right. So basically it's the residence is over the warehouse. You pick that up right away, and we will have to insulate the floor of the residence or the ceiling of the warehouse to accommodate any temporal differences. Part of the interesting part about the house on top of the building was really the circulation, in my standpoint. So we have a main entrance to the building that's along the north side of Building A, and that is really like the hub of their business and their house. That's their main access to their lobby, that access their residence on top. For me, that was the bigger concern for having a house on top of the warehouse, and I think we achieved that through combining those entryways.
Interesting. Thanks for indulging me. Other questions for our applicant? Seeing none, we'll give you a chance to take a rest. Thank you. I do not at this time have any cards from the public for anyone wishing to speak on this case, so now is your last opportunity. Would anyone like to speak on this case from the public? Okay, seeing none, I will close the public commentary section. And, well, since we don't have anything for our applicant to rebut, is there anything else you wish to say to us, seeing there were no additional comments?
Thank you for listening.
Okay, well said. So, let's begin our commissioner discussion. If there are comments, questions that we need to resolve still, let's get to those. How do we feel about this project? Commissioner Amorosi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I won't be supporting this project simply because of that large frontage, 8-foot-high wall surrounded by housing. I can't. Tempe's supposed to be a walkable, pedestrian-friendly city, and I don't see that happening here, especially with the bike path on the other end. I know I walk my dogs around there, and so there's a lot of foot traffic and bike traffic around there. I don't see how this helps the neighborhood.
So if I may, I'd like to ask a question back. As I understand it, the wall became 8 feet as kind of a city staff condition. At one point it was lower. If it was a lower wall, would that be more amenable to you?
Mr. Chair, I think that there wasn't enough effort put into the design of the underneath portion as it relates to traffic. And I think that could have been mediated with making it look nicer when it was up front. I mean, a different treatment. And so you didn't need that large of a frontage you're going to see nothing.
All right, fair enough. Other comments, questions, Commissioner Johnson?
Just my opinion of the layout, I guess, is many times when we have these multi-story next to residential, we want it pushed further away from that residential, so we don't have people looking into windows, looking into backyards, things of that nature, privacy issues when you have something a higher level. So I think it's a little bit more appropriate in this instance, since there is housing directly to the, what would that be, the northwest of them, that it's pushed kind of away from that. I use this bike path fairly often, and I think they're going to have a pretty amazing view. So I think it's a fine design, and I will be supporting it.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree. I think it was a nice way to think outside the box and actually create a live-work environment in maybe a situation where you wouldn't normally put something like that. So I appreciate that, and I also appreciate the design that was put into an L-shaped property, so I will be supporting it. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Fairly quiet tonight. Okay, well, I'll chip in briefly. I think overall it's a fine design. It's not where I would want to live. It's not where everyone would want to live, but someone does want to live there and work there. They may have a difficult time selling that to the next owner who's supposed to live there, but that's their business. I agree that setting it back from the street is a good move. I'm not entirely sure about the wall, but I think that this is the appropriate location for projects such as this, and I think it's well executed, so I'll be happy to support it. So having put my obnoxious 2 cents in, shall we hear a motion? I'm going to defer to Commissioner Thornton.
Thank you. Thank you. I would move for approval of PL 170198.
Okay. Motion from Commissioner Thornton. Do I hear a second? Commissioner Sumner seconds. All those in favor by raise of hand, please. And those opposed? So that passes 6-1 with Commissioner Amorosi in the dissension. I believe that's the word we're looking for. Okay, so let's move on to item number 6, which I guess will be our main event. We have Chapman Chevrolet. Ms. Stovall.
Good evening. My name is Karen Stovall, Senior Planner. These requests are for the property located at 1717 East Baseline Road, which is at the southwest corner of McClintock and Baseline. The property is zoned PCC1 and has an existing vehicle sales and repair business that has been operating on the site since the early 70s. The applicant is requesting approval of a use permit to allow the expansion of the existing vehicle repair business and a development plan review for site plan, building elevations, and landscape plan. This is an aerial photo with the proposed site modifications shown on it for reference. On this site plan, please note that north is to the right, so Baseline is to the right. The applicant proposes to demolish the existing vehicle service building and car wash and construct a fully enclosed service building. The roof of the building will hold 97 employee parking spaces that are accessed by a ramp on the north side of the structure. A new car wash tunnel used for dealership and service vehicles only, and detail canopies are proposed on the south side of the new service building. The landscape buffer along the west property line will be improved with 3-inch caliper Mondale pine trees to enhance the screening for the residential uses to the west. There are apartments and single-family uses both to the west of the site. The service building and car wash will be finished with stucco and painted off-white to match the existing sales and warehouse buildings on the property. The service building reaches 28 feet 6 inches at the parapet, and there are angled parking canopies on the roof that extend up to 8 feet 4 inches higher than the parapet. The canopy along the west building wall is sloped down to the west in order to screen the canopy lights. A neighborhood meeting was not required for these applications, but staff did receive 2 phone calls and 2 emails about the project. Those were discussed at the study session. The first call was summarized in the report. The second call and emails were received after completion of the report. The caller left a message about how to submit comments, and I returned that call with another phone message. The emails expressed concerns about the proximity of the new buildings to the street and the building design. I responded to those emails providing copies of the site plan and didn't receive any response back. We've reviewed the information provided with the use permit and development plan review criteria and are recommending approval subject to the stipulations in the report, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Stovall. Do we have any questions for staff? Seeing none, we'll thank you, Ms. Stovall. And then if we could ask our applicant to approach the podium and tell us about your project.
Good evening. Before I begin today, I'd like to thank Karen for all the help she's been through this process and guiding us through it, and thanks, Karen. We'd also like to thank this volunteer DR Commission for taking the time out of your busy schedules to make your city a better place. My name's Barry Barkus, and I'm the project architect for this. What we're proposing here today is to replace the existing open service business buildings with a new fully enclosed and air-conditioned service facility. I believe the project today is considered a legal non-conforming use and could keep going the way it is today with the service facility, the cells, the parts, the car wash, everything could keep going today. This existing facility has been in operation since 1975, and the old service buildings are no longer up to the current standards that the Chapman family is wanting to provide for the comfort and safety of their staff. When the facility was originally developed, it was zoned PSC1, which allowed the current use without the need of a use permit. The PSC1 zoning has since been replaced with PCC1 that now requires a use permit for this use, which is the reason we're here today. This current facility has and always has had a car wash as part of the operations. It is our plans to relocate the car wash into our new service facility. The car wash is used for both new cars and service customer cars. The proposed building we're proposing today is only 4,500 square feet larger than the existing service facilities they have in place. And we'll have one less service bay than they have today. So our expansion is very minimal. The advantages to the adjacent residences we feel are numerous. All service bays will now be indoors, which will eliminate the vast majority of the noise that may be heard today. The air compressors, which are currently on the west side of the building facing the neighbors, open to them, are going to be brought in and put inside the building. So they'll be fully enclosed. The existing car wash will be placed within an enclosed building that will have a sound baffle in it to deflect most of the dryer noise to the east of the building. High-speed roll-up doors will be utilized on the west elevation facing the neighbors that, because it's going to be an air-conditioned building, when the car comes up, the door rolls up, drives in, and comes down very quickly. The building materials, finishes, and colors we're proposing will match the adjacent buildings. In order to provide more environmentally friendly facility, we will be implementing solar panels on the roof canopies, and we will also be recycling the car wash water through a water reclaim system. The roof-mounted solar panels will provide approximately 30% of the energy needed for this building. So I guess probably ought to talk a little bit about the duct that's in the room.
Quack, quack.
I think what I'll do is try and compare theirs with ours. It's just kind of like apples and oranges. Our car wash exists today. Theirs won't. Theirs is a commercial use for the public versus ours is private. Their volume, I mean, our volume a day is probably 50 to 60 service customer cars and new cars that they wash. Their volume has to be in the hundreds a day. Talk about sound studies. Theirs was a model sound study on a model. Ours was not a model. Our sound study was done with the car wash that's there today and real readings taken for that car wash that's going to be relocated. So I think that's kind of what the differences are between theirs and ours. There's really no comparison. Like I said, this business has been here since '75, and that I'm aware of, there's no neighbor complaints about the noise in the current condition, and it's only going to get much, much, much better than it is today. The way the building worked out, the car wash is in the south part of the existing service facility, and in order to construct this properly, that south part has to come down first. It has to be demolished first. We're going to do this in 3 phases. The first phase is to actually build a car wash tunnel, get it done, and then that allow us to move the car wash out of the existing service building into this one and start using it. Then tear down that half of the service building that has the car wash in it. So that was phase 1, was the car wash tunnel. Then phase 2 would be half the building north of the car wash, build that, and then we'd be able to tear down the north service building and then build phase 3 at the very end. So it's critical that the car wash be done in phase 1 immediately. We accept the staff report as it is in all the conditions. In closing, we'd like you to know that the entire reason the Chapman family is wanting to enclose and condition the service department is for the comfort and safety of their staff. Thank you again, and I'm available to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, so questions for Mr. Barkus. Commissioner Johnson.
So this dealership, this is a Chevy dealership? Is that
Yes,
right?
sir.
So I'm curious, with the employee parking that will be on the roof, are you going to include any charging stations for those employees that have Volts or Bolts? You are going to?
He's the general manager, Chase.
Okay. Thank you. That's the only question I have.
Good evening. You're very clever with your quack quack. I have a couple questions. One, how long is it going to be between the phases 1, 2, and 3? What's your time frame?
Oh, how long it'll physically take to build each? Phase 1 will be the quickest because it's just the car wash building and detail building. I would probably say 4.5 months to build phase 1. Phase 2, probably 6 or 7 months, and the same for phase 3.
Okay,
And the reason it's so like that is because we have to keep them in business.
right. Understood. You mentioned the high-speed roll-up doors. Do those have a tripping mechanism in them in case somebody is under them, or they
Yeah.
do?
Yeah, they have all the safety equipment that's required by the federal law.
Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Amorosi, and then we'll come back over here.
So when you're doing the phase 2, phase 3 for the parking, the employees won't be able to use that till phase 3 is finished then, correct?
Right, so phase 3 would have to be fully finished. Then they could move into that building out of phase 3, and then we can tear down phase 3 and then build it.
Okay. Thank you.
And Commissioner Lloyd.
I'm sure it's probably in here, but can you just quickly address the height difference between the existing structure and the new proposed structure?
Approximately 24 inches. Ours is about
That's it.
24 inches high.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anyone else? All right,
I just have one other question.
Commissioner
And
Thornton.
it might be more of a staff question, but regarding the 175-foot long by 10-foot wide right-of-way that you're giving the city for the bus pullout, is that contingent on the approval of this or no?
Yes, the right-of-way dedication would occur with the approval of this development plan review.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Barkus. All right, so now we have a moment for our public hearing section. I have one card. If there are any other individuals who wish to speak, please fill out a card and bring it to our city staff members. I see 2 names here. You may each speak if you wish separately. The way we do this, we have some nice little lights here. We like to provide 3 minutes so that everyone has time. So when you see a red light, we'll ask you to wrap it up and have a seat. So I have Arnie and Mart Larson, is that right? Oh, I'm sorry. Again, I need better glasses. If either or both of you would like to come up and speak, and we just need you to state your name pronounced correctly and your place of residence for the record, please.
I'm Arn Larson. This is my wife, Mary. We are the closest residents to this facility. We've lived there since 1978. So we've been with Chapman Chevrolet their expansions over the last 30, 40 years. We have some concerns. We've worked well with Chapman over the last few years. I mean, they've not been a bad neighbor. The biggest problem we have with it is the fact that we feel it's going to impact the value of our home.
Possibly.
Possibly. It already has impacted the value of our home over the last 40 years. Whenever they do a evaluation, it always comes up that we are neighbor to them. So that does hurt our property. The other thing that we're really concerned about is the new height. That gives everybody a chance to look into our yards and the neighbors' yards. And our neighbors have we've had that conversation with them as well. We're a little bit concerned on how high the wall is around the parking area and how much, how much privacy we're going to lose there.
We're not certain about where the building that's going to have that second roof parking area is located to the west side where the residents live. Is it going to be more on the west side, or is it going to be on the McClintock side? That we're not certain of. And if it's going to be on the west side, as my husband stated, we're concerned about the safety and privacy of the people in our backyards, and up and down the street on both sides can be visibly seen if it's close enough to the west location. And maybe we could propose or suggest that they built a wall high enough on that second-story rooftop parking so people could not look down on the residents.
Yeah. If you look at that picture right there, on the top of the picture, our house is right there. Our house is where the green line is. We are about 18 feet away from their wall. Our house is.
Okay, any last thoughts you'd like to give us?
No.
Okay, well, we'll thank you. Well, actually, any questions for our participants? Yes, Commissioner Thornton.
I'd just like to be a little more clear on what you're asking for. So your concern is that the parking for the employees is going to possibly be an invasion of your privacy, and so you'd like to have something that's tall enough that people can't see over into your yards and your neighbors' yards?
Correct.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, and you're thinking that that screen wall is actually part of the parking structure as opposed to?
Doesn't matter to us, as long as
there's
the privacy.
safety. We're concerned about the safety of our granddaughter in the backyard. People can see our times that we come and go, and it's just a concern. Not just us, neighbors on down the street and across the street.
Okay, fair enough. Well, we do thank you. So we'll ask our applicant to come back up if you'd like to address those thoughts or any others.
The building is about 82 feet away from our west property line, and I think there were photos taken. I don't know if any of you have been to the site, but those trees along our west property line are gigantic, humongous trees, and they do a very, very good job of visual screening, along with the additional trees we're adding just for that reason, is to protect the neighbors from the visual, any possible noise, all of that. So
The trees are already dead there.
Typically, we don't allow additional questions from the public.
I believe, Karen, did you make an on-site visit and inspect the trees?
No.
Okay. We had a landscape architect that made an on-site visit to inspect the trees and told them to replace any that were dead. We'd be happy to put a condition on there that if any are found dead, right now, that we'll replace them.
Commissioner Brennan.
The middle drawing, the middle section on attachment 13 is the east-west section, north, I believe. And it shows the parking, the sloped covered parking on the roof for your solar panels, and a rather high parapet. Can you tell me how high that parapet is?
Actually, it varies because the roof does slope. It's approximately 5 feet.
So it appears to be within maybe 2 feet of the opaque canopy, the parking canopy, shade cover. There it is on the left on the screen there. Well, that's an elevation view. I'm looking at the section which shows it with the same profile, of course. So there's only a gap of about 2 feet, I think. And even if you didn't want to put an opaque spandrel infill there, you could conceivably make that row of covered parking a little lower, and that could be for the cars as opposed to the pickup trucks. Your clearance is probably 7, 8 feet. If that's a 5-foot wall, I'm guessing you have about 7 to 8 feet clear. You can see in that view it almost touches, but the section is probably more accurate. What I'm proposing is that you close that gap by either lowering that one small canopy to provide the opacity that the neighbors would prefer, or a solid panel perhaps.
How about this as an option? The staff had asked that the canopy be sloped in the direction to screen the lighting from the residences to the west. What if we fill the gap between the current masonry wall and the canopy with a screen of perforated metal. Maybe screen.
Off the cuff, it sounds like that'd be a perfect solution. Of course, if you wrap enough of it so that it's not just that one corner, but enough of that, that's conceivably would not detract from the building because it could be back on the inner plane of the parapet.
Right, so what we could do is wrap the corners and run it back far enough to where it matches the depth of the canopy.
Does anyone else have a comment? I mean, that sounds like a good solution to me off the cuff. If anyone else sees that.
I'm going to break form. Mr. and Mrs. Larson, how do you feel about that solution? Okay.
Clarify for us, which building is going to have this rooftop parking? Is it the one close? Or the one on McClintock side?
I believe we're talking about the portion of the parking structure closest to your residence, so no one would have a view into your yard. Is that correct?
This is Baseline to the north, so this is where you live to the west. So this is the structure that's the new service facility with the rooftop parking. So we're talking about the parking canopy that's over these parking spaces. So that's already angled down so that if I'm standing on the roof, I can't see anything, but right now there's a gap between the canopy and the parapet wall. So we're talking about closing that up.
Okay. So if I may, I'd just like to ask a question then. How do you feel about having two conditions added? One, that if any trees are found dead, that they are to be replaced, and two, that you work with city staff to work out additional screening as needed.
That's agreeable. On the first condition, would it be some kind of timeline?
How do we do that?
I would suggest that they have to be replaced prior to C of O for phase one, which is the same time frame that would be required to install the new trees that are shown on the landscape plan.
Makes sense.
That way the planner can go on and do his inspection before giving his final, and check them out.
Would you be amenable to that?
Absolutely.
Okay. Any more questions for Mr. Barkus? Thank you. All right. So this is productive. Working together as a city. All right. Commissioner comment and discussion. Anybody? Commissioner Sumner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks for coming in today and telling us exactly what your thoughts are. It's very helpful, and thanks to the property owner for being so amenable to make concessions. That's great. As for the process that we as a city follow, I think we do have some improvements to make, and I know we're just following the rules here, and this should not impact this case at all. But when we're doing a project that's this big, and there's no public hearing that is required, that doesn't make sense to me. This is a use permit. There's a lot of projects that have come through lately that we have not done a public hearing on. That's what our code says. We're all following the rules. I just think we need to look at some point about changing the rules because these are pretty significant changes that impact folks who live right next door, and to not have more notification just doesn't make sense to me.
Just to get a clarification, Commissioner Sumner, are you talking about actual neighborhood meeting to be conducted? Because the use permit required a postcard notification, so that's what staff did on this particular case. So is that what you're asking for, additional notification to have some kind of a neighborhood meeting required?
Thank you, Suparna. I would just encourage us to look at the entire breadth of what we do. The fire station that we just looked at, I don't think had enough outreach, for instance. This one didn't have enough outreach. I think we just need to let folks know what's going on a little more often, and that way we would avoid having issues when we get to this body or to City Council.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. Thoughts on the project? Commissioner Lloyd?
I'll just add one thing, to echo that it was good to see not only the applicant but the neighbors work together to find a resolution. And, your comment about it affecting property values is definitely heard, but it is good to see the owner of that property, who has been there since 1970, reinvest money to continue to make it part of our community and not an eyesore and deteriorate over time. So thank you both.
Since you guys aren't all jumping at your microphones, I'll chip in. I'll say thank you to our applicant. It's good to hear from you. Thank you for working with your neighbors. I would like to say that I know not everyone's excited to live next to a car dealership, and having a large function such as this is not necessarily going to be the most appealing structure to have, but I think what you're doing is a much needed improvement, and I think it's very well done. And some of the measures you put in place with the technologies and the green measures, personally, I appreciate a great deal. So I'll be in support of this project, and I thank you for working with your neighbors. Anyone else want to chip in? All right, let's hear a motion. Commissioner Johnson.
I move for the approval of Chapin Chevrolet PL 170388 with two stipulations, the addition of two stipulations, one being that the trees, would you like to read them? Thank you.
Yes, the first one is that any trees found dead along that west property line would be replaced with phase one prior to certificate of occupancy. And the second is that the applicant shall work with staff to provide screening between the parapet and the canopy along the west building wall.
Just a question, are there, I don't want a Charlie Brown tree going in. I'm just curious if there's a size stipulation we typically include a box caliper.
The buffer trees would be a minimum 1.5-inch caliper in size.
Thank you.
Fair enough. Okay, motion from Commissioner Johnson. Second, please.
Second.
Commissioner Thornton seconds. All those in favor by show of hands, please. And I see 7, and therefore opposed is 0. Yes? Okay. So that passes 7-0. Thank you. All right. So now, as is my custom, I like to forget to do something every meeting, and I've realized that I have forgotten to introduce city staff again, so we're going to do it now. So we have with us tonight Suparna Das Gupta, Karen Stovall, Obina Kingsby, Cynthia Jarrett, and in our audience we also have Ryan LeVake, and we had at one point Chad Weaver. Thank you for your attendance. Sorry to have put that off to the very last. Best for last. All right. Do we have any additional announcements or business, upcoming projects and so forth?
Chair Lyon and commission members, just to let you know, for the February 27th meeting, we do have the Roosevelt Court Townhomes at 323 South Roosevelt Street. It is a development plan review for four townhome units that is completing the phased development that they had built only portion of it. So they're coming and matching the rest of it and just finishing up after all these years because of the construction didn't happen. This is the same project that we may get some public comments on. And I think Commissioner Sumner's question, I think, goes to those development plan reviews, and I think that's kind of what you were alluding to with notification, that typically with development plan review, sometimes there's no code requirement on those development plan reviews. I think that's kind of what you were getting at with the last comment you made. So, yes, I understand your concern. It's a code text amendment that we would have to address in some format if that's something that we get direction from. We have to seek direction from council on some of these. So Ryan would have to, and Chad would have to get that direction. So, but I do understand this is something that we do know. And then Commissioner Brown wanted me to announce it. We got that handout that Ryan gave out about the public meeting for the Urban Core. And please look for your email for any additional meetings that is on there if you wanted to attend any one of those.
Suparna, can I just ask you real quick, what is the reach for notification these days? Is it 600 feet? Yeah.
It is 600 feet from the property, and then 1/4 mile for any neighborhood associations or HOAs. So they get, that's an extended one for just those.
And does that relate to property owners or lessors and renters?
We pull the information off of the assessors for, based on the property owner drawing a radius and getting the property owner's information.
The only time tenants would be included in the notification is if it is a business in a shopping center, then the tenants of that shopping center would also get notification, but not apartment renters, et cetera.
But in certain cases, we have done, courtesy notices too for people who are interested, and if they tell us they would want to be notified during a neighborhood meeting process or something, so we add those additional people into the list and do special outreach to them too.
I just think the nature of renting is changing a little bit. We have a little more consolidation of ownership. People are renting for longer, as you see in a lot of big cities. So while one day we might have thought of renters as somebody who's kind of transient and might be here for a year and then gone, that's becoming, I think, less and less so, and people are here for a longer time. So I think we might want to think about notification of renters in residential as well.
If I may add my own anecdote, today I ran into the chair of my HOA board, and they had received public notice from the city of Tempe, but the owners of the condos did not receive any of that notification. And I don't know if that's typical, if it's typically sent to the property manager or the board president of the HOA and not the owners of the other properties within the condo, but that is something that did happen today, literally today.
May I ask which project it was?
Orchid House. Oh, the project was, I believe it was the revisions for, or not the revision, the reversion or the downgrading of the downzoning, correct?
So, if it's the property owners, if it's a property owner, it should have been on the assessors.
So for the Orchid House notification, because you're within a quarter mile of the downzoning, but you're probably not within 600 feet of the subject parcel for downzoning.
So that would
why
just,
the property owners didn't get notified at the association condominium site.
but the HOA is notified?
Yeah, so we do a greater notification for HOAs or neighborhood
Okay, I see.
associations.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank
and
you.
that's what we rely on, the HOAs and the neighborhood associations to distribute that information, but they don't.
They just take money, they don't do things.
But I understand, thank you. That clears it up.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, we're adjourned.